You ever deadass sit back and think about how a group that used to be hunted down like straight up criminals, straight electrocuted in mental wards and had their brains chopped up in lobotomies, now has a massive platform worldwide? Like for real, their movement is fully backed by Western governments, mega corporations, and even the UN. Is this purely a fight for human rights, or are global elites putting major money behind this wave to control society, politics, and international business? From lobotomy victims to a billion-dollar project, let's break it down and see who's really pulling the strings behind this global propaganda machine.
Look, bro, if you've been scrolling through your timeline lately, it's nothing but rainbow flags or heated conspiracy debates. There's this one narrative that keeps popping up on my For You page. The LGBT movement is just a plot by the global elite to destroy society. Hold up. I get why you'd think that. It looks like it makes sense, right? Because all of a sudden it's everywhere and every major corporation is backing it. But honestly, saying this whole thing was created from scratch by the global elite is cap. It's a total twist on actual history. You think a bunch of old, rich dudes sat in a dark room and said, "Yo, let's start this movement from nothing to ruin the world." That ain't how it works, boss. Don't be lazy and just call everything a conspiracy. Fact is, this movement started from the bottom, born out of real, bloody suffering and persecution over in the West. The global elites didn't show up until way later. They're just riding the wave. They saw a massive movement with crazy political leverage, and then they started pumping billions into it for their own agenda. Don't get the logic twisted. To make sure you're not just swallowing half-baked info, let's break down the history from back when they were hunted like animals to how they got this loud today. Sit tight, I'm breaking this down with facts, not just empty emotions. We're exposing the whole thing. You gotta know this didn't just happen overnight. There's a long-ass history behind why their movement got this extreme. In the next chapter, I'm taking you back to a time when the law and the medical field teamed up to completely wipe these people out using methods that will make your jaw drop with how straight-up barbaric they were.
All right, you gotta understand this first. Way before rainbow flags became a corporate marketing trend, being part of this community from the 19th century up to the mid-20th century was basically a death wish. For real. Western countries, especially the UK, were straight up hunting them down. The UK even exported these anti-gay laws to its colonies through Section 377 of the IPC in India back in 1860, which Malaysia and Singapore copied later. Not only were people getting life in prison, but the medical world labeled them as mentally insane. In 1952, the APA put this behavior in the DSM manual as a sociopathic personality disturbance. And since it was labeled a disease, they had to cure it, right? Now, this is the part that deadass makes my blood boil. The cures were straight up torture. In the 50s and 60s, doctors in the US and the UK used what they called aversion therapy. They'd force patients to look at pictures of naked men, and the second they reacted, they'd hit them with high-voltage electric shocks or inject them with drugs to make them throw up violently. The goal? To traumatize their brains so they'd associate attraction with physical pain. On top of that, they did chemical castrations and lobotomies, an old-school surgery where they literally severed the nerve pathways in the frontal lobe. They were cured by being permanently brain damaged for life. Imagine how messed up the legal and medical systems were back then. That's why the pressure building up inside that community was a ticking bomb just waiting to go off. This constant pressure from cops and crazy medical experiments slowly bred a deep frustration, creating an underground solidarity that would eventually fuel the most radical open resistance in history.
Moving into the 1980s, things got even worse when a mysterious, deadly disease hit Los Angeles and New York. There were tons of reports of rare lung infections and deadly skin cancers, mostly hitting men who had relations with men. Because the US government back then was mad hostile toward them, they didn't care and ignored it. They treated it like it was just the price for an alternative lifestyle, and the media ran wild, calling it the gay plague or grid. But when scientists finally discovered the virus in 1983, which we know as HIV, it was proven that the virus mutated from the primate virus SIV in Africa through injured hunters, not created by their community. But since the stigma was already set, they were completely ostracized, kicked out by families, and people were even scared to touch a plate they used. But listen, the turning point of their radical resistance actually started a bit earlier, on June 28, 1969, at a sketchy bar called the Stonewall Inn in New York. This bar was a safe haven for marginalized people, from kids kicked out of their homes to drag queens. Well, that night, the cops raided the place out of nowhere and got mad aggressive. Usually, people would just let themselves get dragged into the police vans, but that night was different. The crowd outside the bar lost it. They fought back, throwing coins, beer bottles, and bricks at the cops. Massive riots broke out for days, which became known as the Stonewall Uprising. From that moment on, they realized, if we want rights, we gotta fight fire with fire. We can't just sit back. A year later, they organized a commemorative march, which is the blueprint for the Pride Parade you see every June now. That bloody momentum on the streets of NYC changed their movement forever, triggering a wave of new regulations in the West, while catching the eyes of billionaire capitalists who saw a massive bag to be made behind the movement.
Now, once this movement gained major political momentum post-Stonewall, that's where the global elites you're talking about come into play. After the APA dropped the mental disorder label in 1973 and same-sex marriage got legalized in the US in 2015, their political lobby became incredibly powerful. Why is it so strong? Because there's massive money backing it. Facts! According to official reports, Western billionaires have pumped billions of dollars into this movement. Who are we talking about? You got John Stryker through his Arcus Foundation giving millions in grants to political organizations to push this agenda. You got Tim Gill throwing crazy money to reshape the American legal landscape, not to mention George Soros through the Open Society Foundations, or Peter Buffett funding the normalization of gender identity globally. Because of this elite money, the propaganda has gone totally overboard. In Western countries, they're painting crosswalks in rainbow colors. Pre-K children's storybooks are explicitly teaching fluid gender concepts, and they're even sliding these characters into kids' cartoons. That's the part that's wild, you know? Even us in Indonesia, raised with religious values that strictly forbid this, still get blindsided by what's on TV. Imagine a generation of kids over there who've been fed this narrative since they were toddlers, being told it's just a normal lifestyle choice. Obviously, it's going to grow massively. So yeah, the global elite's involvement is dead-ass real through massive financial intervention from world conglomerates, basically created a new ecosystem, a rainbow-packaged industry that doesn't just look for public sympathy, but is used as a high-level political tool for much darker agendas.
But the hilarious part, bro, is that the entry of these capitalists and global elites actually caused infighting within their own community. Now there are terms like rainbow capitalism and pinkwashing. Rainbow capitalism is when megacorporations suddenly flip their logos to rainbows in June just to sell merchandise and cash in on that community, what they call pink money. But the second July hits, they switch it right back to normal like they don't give a crap about solidarity. Now, the most wild and foul practice is pinkwashing, which is pulled off by countries like Israel. They intentionally run global campaigns framing themselves as the only safe haven and paradise for this community in the Middle East. Why do they do that? To cover up the brutality of the occupation and the genocide they're carrying out against Palestinians. That's mad shady, right? So, what's the takeaway? This issue is massive because it's steered and funded by global elite powers, but the movement itself has a long history of resistance. Now, speaking as a Muslim, obviously I'm against it and will never support this movement because it's strictly forbidden in my religion. The sin is clear. But I also don't agree with people taking the law into their own hands, cyberbullying them excessively, or using physical violence against them.
Why? Because history literally proves that the harder the system and the stigma hit them back then, the more radical their backlash became. Hate speech won't make anyone change. It just hardens their hearts and breeds resentment. Our job is to protect our own families, educate people properly, and keep using our heads. All right, that's it for me. Stay critical, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.